Good afternoon, all. So today we have a very special guest in our orientation program, and he's not other than Mr. Viswanathan Anand, the world champion, the Grandmaster, and we are very lucky to have him. Though he does not need any, introduction, still I request our director, Professor Murali Sambasivam, to briefly introduce him to all of you, and after that we'll listen from him today. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Vishwanathan Anand. And I'm very glad you accepted our invitation. I'm extremely delighted to introduce our GGM, Great Grandmaster, Viswanathan Anand. Viswanathan Anand is considered as one of the all-time greats in chess. It is his success in the world scene that has made this ancient Indian game a mass sport in India. The critics rate him as one of the biggest natural talents ever in the history of chess. His hallmark lightning speed and intuitive play came to be recognized when he became the first Indian Grandmaster in 1987. His championship win against the Israeli Boris Gelfand in 2012 will be remembered as one of the closest and tense struggle for the world title. With this win, Anand cemented his place among the greatest champions of all times, becoming the only non-Soviet to successfully retain a world championship title 3 times. He has recently been hailed for his resilience and grit in challenging for the world title after losing it. Anand is the only person in chess history to have won a world championship title in all formats: match, knock, and tournament. He is the first Asian to win the World Championship in 2000. He has won every classical, rapid, and blind chess event in the chess circuit. He has won the prestigious Lyon Magistral 10 times, Corsica Masters 6 times, and the strongest rapid championship, the Mainz Classic, a staggering 11 times. His results in rapid chess make him one, if not the greatest player ever in the chess history. If his talent as a rapid chess player is legendary, his records in classical chess have been superlative. He is one of the few players in chess history to win the Tata Steel chess event 5 times in the tournament's long history. He has won the prestigious Linares chess event 3 times, Dortmund's Sparkson 3 times, Bilbao Grand Slam, London Chess Classic. He won the strongest candidates event in 2014 with a round to spare. Anand is the winner of the first and second feed World Cup held in Shenyang and Hyderabad. The World Cups are a series of prestigious knockout tournaments. He is one of the few non-Soviet players in sport. Vishwanathan Anand has been feted with many international awards. He is the proud recipient of chess Oscars given for the best player of the year. He received this award 6 times. Now thus becoming one of the few non-Russians to win the title 6 times. In India, he has received the high civilian awards of Padma Vibhushan, Padma Bhushan, Padma Shri, and Arjuna Award. He is also the first recipient of the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award. Now known as the gentleman champion in the chess world, Anand is a spokesperson for children with cerebral palsy. He is fluent in German, Spanish, and French. His travels have taken him close to 50 countries around the world. Anand is a keen follower of current affairs, world business, and astronomy. He has the unique distinction of having a planet named after him. Please join me in welcoming our GGM, Great Grandmaster Viswanathan Anand.
Hello, everyone. Already, I think we are completely used to the idea that we see each other on video screens. First of all, congratulations to all of you on the start of your career and your induction into the management program. So today I thought I would touch upon the role of failure in my life. What is it? How I felt when I encountered it, and how I dealt with it. So at the beginning of my career, failure was quite a different experience. I mean, when I was 6 years old, I learned the game from my mother. Then in a few months, I joined a chess club and I lost my first 3 games. I mean, I must have gone there with so much enthusiasm. You know, let's see how it goes against these strong players in the club. But my first tournament, I lost 3 games. And I still kept going back. I mean, when you're that young, you don't really get stopped by anything. And at the end of the tournament, I got a prize. I got a book where they said this is the prize for perseverance, because I did not quit the tournament and I kept coming back every day. That's a very natural stage of growth. In fact, in my sub-junior and junior days, I did not, I had setbacks, of course. I had some, I expected to do well in 1981, 1982 in some of the sub-junior and junior events. And I was surprised that people I did not expect to trouble me suddenly would beat me in the game, and this would upset my tournament plans. But I think at that age, there is, what you know is so little compared to what you don't know, that learning tends to have a natural flow to it, like a river. There's just more of it coming along. I did not tend to sit and reflect a lot on what was going wrong and trying to learn lessons. I simply learned new things. In fact, this is one of my preferred methods even today. When I have some disappointing tournament, the first thing is to come and work on something new, not necessarily work on what went wrong, but just continue learning. And if you have new things to learn, the brain is distracted. It finds something that is very curious, and soon you've even forgotten the disappointment and it goes on. Second thing is, when you learn something new, you get to try it soon, and that optimism carries you along. Till I became a grandmaster, I don't recall sitting and brooding on any of my failures. I had my big breakthrough year in 1983. And what was special about this year is, think about it, I was a club player from roughly 1980, when we returned from the Philippines, till about 1983. I would go to the same chess club. 90% of the participants were the same. So I would meet the same opponents, especially in the later rounds. The same familiar faces you would meet. In those days, we'd play 6-round tournaments, so that you could have 3 games on one day and then 3 games on Sundays, Saturday and Sunday, and the tournament was over. And I consistently scored between 4.5 and 5 points. And that was roughly my level. Besides that, I would go to the club for practice sessions where I used to play blitz games against all the players. This is something you play for fun. And I emphasize again the fun in this. You just do something because you enjoy it. And I enjoyed playing chess like that. So what we would do is we would take a chess club and, a chess set and a clock, and give everyone 5 minutes. So 2 people would play a game. The winner would keep staying and he could play the next person. The loser would get up, get in the queue. And you can imagine, if they're like 5 or 6 people, you had to wait almost an hour. If there were even more, you waited an hour and a half. But it was a social thing. Everybody would comment on everybody's games, and it was just spontaneous. And this was my formula for everything. If something good or bad happened, the next day you would go and just play. Anyway, in 83, I had my breakthrough year. It came right after my school exams, so in the summer holidays. And I remember I'd been waiting eagerly for the summer holidays just so that I could play chess again. And in the very first tournament, I won all 6 games. So I was the same player, I thought, playing against the same opponents in the same competitions with the same time controls. And then suddenly I won everything. Okay, it can be an accident. So I didn't think about it a lot. But that was a magical 3 months, that summer holidays, because then I won the board prize in the national team championship, where we were sent as a junior team simply to encourage us. We were sent as we were called the Coals after young horses. And I won the top board prize. And suddenly I even had to change my plan. My original plan was to play in Bombay and come back. But now, because I won this board prize, I got a entry into the national qualifiers. So I changed my plan, went on to Ahmedabad. And in my first qualifiers, I qualified for the men's championship. And so by the time I got back and school restarted, I'd gone from being a club player to a chance of winning the national title. And then when I went to my the sub-junior tournament, again, same kind of event. This was October 1983. And I went there, same player against my same rivals and all that. And this time I won by a clean sweep, won all 9 games. Then I went to the national junior, won that as well. And I had no idea what had changed. Of course, in the case of the sub-juniors and juniors, it was clear that every participant was looking at me like, what went wrong with him? Why is he winning everything? And this has a psychological impact on them as well. So very successful year. And then in the men's championship, I won, I finished 4th. And in my first attempt, I qualified to represent India. So now I could represent India in all the junior and sub-junior categories and at the men's level, which automatically meant you got some sports ministry funding, you got a chance to play the Olympiad as a team. There were some open tournaments as well I could play. And so really fantastic year. And afterwards, I tried to understand what exactly happened this year. And I think my explanation is that those 3 years, I had not been sitting idle. I'd been having fun, but playing chess, learning chess, practicing. And I had not realized that I was getting stronger. And sometimes you need a magic shot at opening up. Okay, so far it looks like I'm describing success rather than failure. And of course, that's partially true. But I want to say that once upon a time, for me, failure and success weren't things I dealt with. I simply was optimistic enough just to go to the next tournament and start working. And this worked very well. Then I had to try for the Grandmaster title, which now we have more than 60 Grandmasters. But then it was the big question mark. As soon as people heard that you were a chess player, they only had 2 questions for you in those days. That Fischer-Spassky match that happened, and it was already 14, 15 years back by this point. So for us, for chess players, it is slightly historical, but of course, a lot of people remember this classic match. And the second question was, why couldn't anyone in India become a Grandmaster? Somehow these were the only 2 topics, questions you heard, if at all you heard anything. So it was like a big psychological barrier. And all of us knew that it would be a big accomplishment to become the first one. Anyway, so in 86, I started trying for the Grandmaster title. And it's basically like a doctorate. You win it once, and after that, you don't have to prove it again. You don't have to earn the title again. And you have to perform at a high level, at least 2 or 3 times over 24 games. So multiple good performances, not just based on one. And my first tournament, I did incredibly well. Again, much better than I expected to do. And I missed the Grandmaster norm by only half a point, which is, the bare minimum. So I have the feeling it is quite close. It's just around the corner, and I will get it soon if I'm coming this close. But in fact, I spent 6 or 7 tournaments without making my Grandmaster norm. And then I spoke to an experienced arbiter, and he told me, one day it'll just happen and you won't even notice it. But right now it's almost psychological, but one day you'll just cross over. So that gave me a little bit of optimism. Then in between, I won the World Junior title, which was a big confidence boost. And then just like he predicted, there were 2 tournaments in Coimbatore and in Delhi. And in the first tournament, I only needed a draw in the game as opposed to needing to win. And the event at Coimbatore, I even finished the norm 1 round early. So incredibly smooth performance. Again, this sounds very similar to what I mentioned earlier. You simply keep working towards a goal and you get it. In 1988, though, after I got my titles, I got it December 87. In 88, for the first time, I had 6 months where I did not have a single result of the level of the last 2 years. So not even close to missing the norm. So I didn't make the norm. I didn't even come close to it. And the question, but I was already a grandmaster. Why am I struggling to make a grandmaster result? So this was strange. And here I learned, I think, one significant lesson in my life, which is that until this point, I had a clear goal. It doesn't have to be the most ambitious goal in the world. I mean, I was not aiming to become world champion yet. I only wanted to become a grandmaster. But still, the moment I arrived at a tournament, automatically I knew what my expected score was. So a grandmaster result could be 75% or 72% or 69%. And depending, as the strength of your opposition increases, the required percentages drops. And I just needed to make that. So as soon as I arrived at a tournament, I knew what I was aiming for. And the problem after becoming grandmaster is that I certainly had no aim in a tournament. I could underperform or outperform, but there was no clear target. And I still had this feeling of accomplishment. I've become a grandmaster, I'm world junior champion. What a fantastic. And that was quite frustrating about 6 months. Later on, many grandmasters told me the same thing happened to them, that they would get the title and then for a few months they would struggle before they got used to it. And this is similar to maybe getting your first job, or you would be thinking, well, will I get a job? What kind of thing, what kind of a job am I looking for? And maybe you're very happy with what you've got, and suddenly you don't know what to do with yourself. That focus has gone. So after about 6 months, I eventually decided, well, let me try to qualify for the world title and increase my rating. And this was a sensible goal. And soon my performance also stabilized back again. So that was one learning, that it's very, very helpful to have a clear goal in front of you. It's a theme I will return to a little bit later as well. Then in 89, I had one tournament where suddenly things went wrong. So the occasional failure, but nothing on this scale where you simply feel blocked for a long time. In 94, I had a fairly traumatic loss, I would say. I was playing in the candidates, which is the qualifier for the world title. So I was almost the last stages, and I had 2-point lead after things that in the last 3 games I would have to lose to be not to qualify. And I almost not realized it, but there was an overconfidence that had come in. I'm not normally an overconfident person. I mean, it's not like I'm often thinking that everything is going to be easy. But sometimes when things come too easily, and for a few months they had, I'd been crossing every goal very easily, then you almost don't realize it. You keep telling yourself to be serious, but your mind stops believing you and stops listening to you. It's almost there's like a dissonance. So what happened then was suddenly I lost the 6th game, I lost the 7th, so 2 out of the 3. I drew the match and then I lost the tiebreak. And this was a big shock because 2 days before I'd already started thinking what I'm going to do against my next opponent. And I'd completely forgotten to finish the job. So what did I learn from that? Well, the first obvious conclusion was, well, you can't relax till the goal is set. That's, a basic conclusion. Maybe a more important conclusion I learned was that overconfidence sometimes happens inside, and you shouldn't, just because you go through some rituals or some habits which you always do, doesn't mean it's not affecting you. But this was a really big failure, and I cannot emphasize enough, because it takes 3 years to recover from one of these things, because you need to qualify again and start at the beginning again and go through the cycle to get back to that stage. So it was costly. But luckily, to cut a long story short, there were 2 world championship cycles at that point, because chess world had a split. So I was still going to play in the other one. And suddenly there was a slight panic mode. I went to play my next match. Luckily, I had a month to recover from this. And then I played a match in Spain, and this time it went very easily. But till the last minute, I didn't relax. And even though my opponent at that point was one of my easier opponents, this time I tried to be very cautious and focused and win it. There were a lot of things I learned at this point. So the first thing was clearly overconfidence, complacency, those things. And simply to be very, very serious about something. But by a strange coincidence, now I would again play the guy that I lost to in the other cycle in the final of this cycle. So because he was still qualifying in both cycles. And so we had a final match in March the next year. So this was in 94, and the next match was scheduled in 1995. So I went in 95 January early to train. I had 2 very strong trainers, very experienced people, and we spent 2 months training. But on top of that, a friend told me, your physical fitness, you need to work on it. I mean, and I didn't like his suggestion, because it implied that my fitness was what cost me a point there. And I thought, well, if I had not lost 1 game in the last 3, and that would have been enough for me to win the match, would you have still told me this? And it's a bit of a nonsensical explanation. But I thought, what's the harm in it? And suddenly I was not sure of myself as well. So I thought, well, no harm in incorporating a little of that. So I started a daily running routine. And in this case, I think what failure taught me was it doesn't matter if you don't identify precisely what went wrong. Failure is a good chance for you to go over everything again and try to analyze everything in your life and see if there's something you can improve. Just because something isn't going wrong doesn't mean there's nothing to improve there. But if you've been successful for 5 or 6 months, it's very hard to still force yourself to try new things, to improve all things, to criticize yourself. It's very hard, because you think, well, how much can you criticize yourself? After all, I'm still doing well. That sort of mentality gets in. But here, I changed my physical routine. I changed my training routine. I learned some new things. I learned a new opening only for this match. And after an initial setback, I qualified for the world title against Kasparov. Then I missed my first 2 world titles again in 95 and then again in 98. And 98 was even more narrow, and the conditions were a bit unfair to me. So there was even more grounds to make excuses and move aside. But I think by now I knew that some things in life are harder than they look. And it's not a question of being at fault, but if you don't show respect, take into account that things can always go wrong, nothing is assured, and really work. And I learned the lesson the hard way. I mean, I had enough failures at crucial moments just to feel this. So in it's a lot different, but there's a certain amount of experience that's just baked in. And also it was important that having finished second 2 times, it no longer satisfied me. I mean, in the previous events, I went to the match thinking getting here itself was an accomplishment. And now if I win, that's a bonus. But by the time I played the third match in Delhi in 2000, I knew that finishing second no longer made me happy. This time I had to win, and this feeling comes from inside. So this ambition. It is the same ambition, by the way, that you feel when you're very young. When you're very young, you just think, I'm going to go to the top. It may be innocent, but in some ways, it's the nicest and most straightforward. I mean, we complicate our lives with other things, but sometimes a child's way of looking at things is very simple. And in my third attempt, I won the world title, and very convincingly. I basically I only had one moment of danger. It was very dangerous because I came very close to being eliminated. But after that one moment of luck in that whole tournament, things went very, very smoothly. Then the next year, I remember that, you know, sometimes when a long-awaited goal, you miss it and then, you achieve it, and then suddenly you feel empty. But I found that my first 3 tournaments after the World Championship, I still won all 3 of them. And so I started to relax again. And by the way, in life, at least my experience is the same mistakes will happen again and again in slightly new versions and always repackaged so that you don't recognize it. But it always, it tends to be the same mistake. So you'll see the same things again. In my 4th tournament, I went there. And by the way, problems had been accumulating for a while. So I had many games I was making a lot of mistakes, but then my opponent would make even more and then I would win, or I could have won more games, but I won barely what was necessary to win the tournament. So there was some turbulence, if you like. But as long as I was winning tournaments, it was easy to tell myself, yes, you know, at some point I will get back and fix these problems, and but not to feel the urgency. So once upon a time, I called it overconfidence. Now it's just that same overconfidence isn't there. But at the same time, I started to feel that there is time to fix these problems. It's the same mistake, it comes in a new shape. And then I won a match between the 2 world champions. If you remember, there were 2 cycles. And so I won a match between the 2 world champions in Mainz. But even my play was so shaky that I realized that this was not the way to go forward. But I told myself, well, I've already agreed to this tournament. I cannot get out of it. So I'll play the next tournament. But after that, I have to get back home and seriously work. So even before going to the tournament, I was aware of the problem, and still I managed the worst tournament of my career until that point. So, I mean, here the problem was a lot of small mistakes started to creep in. My execution was getting loose. My eye for details was missing things. I was not up to date on all the latest developments. And so a lot of things, nothing by itself was disastrous. It was just the accumulation of them. And also in these 6 months, my opponents had looked at my games and thought, well, the execution is very shaky. Maybe even if he gets a good position, we should never resign. Even if he's escaping, we should not give him a draw. You know, they make their own observations as well. And well, it resulted in the worst tournament of my life. And after that, I think the only thing I could do was to pour cold water on my face. I mean, I was so happy when that tournament ended and I could go home. And here, the easiest way to get past this event is, first of all, to forget it. So for 1 month, I didn't look at chess. You know, when your self-confidence goes, then it doesn't matter what you fix. And this turned out to be my problem for the next few months. Eventually, I came back. I started working on chess again. I mean, a lot of my problems were fixable, but what happened was, even with all that, my self-confidence simply hadn't come back. And I lost my world title later that year. Though my play was good now. I mean, my play was good enough to have held it, but I missed that little bit of luck that I'd had the previous year. And it's also psychological. Your opponents stop fearing you so much, so they become more confident, and the same thing. And it was only next April. So this all happened in July 2001, and in April 2002, I mean, I had not had a single impressive result. You can say that I was recovering, and it's true. Results were getting better. So in April 2002, I looked at, I got an invitation actually to a very, very nice event. They were going to have a fantastic event in Prague, and all the top players in the world. And I was not even the favorite, even though I was probably the best rapid player of all time at that time. Though it was a rapid tournament, I didn't really see myself as a favorite. So I went to Prague, and my aims were very limited. I just felt that it would be nice to play 2 or 3 good games, have a half decent result, and that's it. I don't want more. I just want to play some good chess. And so my expectations also were very low. And this turned out to be a nice attitude, because for the last few months, you're constantly trying to solve a problem that is not easily solvable. I'm trying to fix the problem of self-confidence, but you can't trick yourself. You're trying to tell yourself what is the right result for someone like you, but you can't force these things. And so it had to come naturally. And this was the tournament where it happened, where I finally went with such low expectations. I didn't feel any pressure. All the other people actually felt much more pressure than me, and not without incident, but I won that tournament. And then slowly my year recovered. And from April 2002 till maybe January 2005, I was probably the best player in the world for these 2.5 years. My results were, my consistency especially had come back. Then 2006 was, I mean, I was having a very good year. The problem for me was someone else was having an even better year, and 2 of them, in fact. So Topalov suddenly had an unbelievable burst of energy, and he started winning everything. And I was making a very good result by my standards, but he was making even more points. And which is why I did the count from 2002 to January 2005. I then had this tournament in 2006, where for the first time, I lost 2 games with the black pieces. And I had almost not lost a game with the black pieces in the last 2 years that I mentioned. And if I lost, it's because I gambled and took risks, not in a game where I was simply trying. So again, the question came, what went wrong? But this time I remembered my lesson from 2001, and I told myself I should start working on this problem very early and try to shut it down before it becomes worse. And this was nice, because if you leave things neglected, then very quickly they get out of hand. Other people around you realize what's going on, and then you become a target. And then in late 2007, I won the World Championship title again. After this, I actually had my best match period. So in 2007, I won a tournament format. And then 2008, 10, and 12, I played 3 matches in a row. And I won all of them. But the first one, I played the best match of my life. I had found some new ways of working. I took some huge risks. And here I would emphasize this ability to risk take. Because if you're doing well, it's very easy to say, well, let me keep improving what I'm doing well. And that seems the most natural course. But the problem is it's hard to squeeze water out of a rock. If you're doing well at something, chances are you're already doing it at a high level. You can, of course, keep improving, but it gets harder. And so in 2008, what I did was I decided I was going to switch my main opening. In effect, instead of playing the line I played all my life, I was now going to gamble. And there were good grounds to take this risk, but still, I took that risk and went all in. And that's why it's too much to say that I did this and therefore the success came and therefore it is obvious that you must take a risk every time. But what happens is this risk taking has to become a regular habit because it's the only way you can grow as a player. Again, failure is the best way to learn this because if you remember in '94, when I failed, it's only then I looked at all aspects of my game and I questioned everything. As long as you're slightly successful, you tend not to question everything. You think every problem can be isolated as one detail and you can fix that. But what I'm especially proud in 2008 is that I managed to take such a big risk despite being the most successful player of 2007. There was nothing obvious that I was missing out. But I still dropped everything and switched completely to this new opening. And the reason I did it was simple. I just thought, against this opponent, this is a better decision. So I'm just going to take the gamble. And also, it was getting hard for me to concentrate on familiar things. And so if I thought if I do something new, then I'll be forced to work harder at the board and I'll get more space to experiment. So this was a very important lesson. One, unfortunately, I didn't apply in my next two matches. Partially because you do something like this once, your opponents will predict it, of course. So there was some logic to not blindly going there. But still, I did incredibly well in 2010 and 12 in the World Championship match. But I started to underperform heavily, in fact, in all other tournaments. And at that point, I thought, well, my whole life I've been waiting to win this world title. So, as long as I'm doing well in this, let me not obsess about this other thing. But again, you can see the same mistake coming in a new shape. And also I was simply tired. I mean, every World Championship match, I was spending 3 months working and then suddenly I'm forced to finish the match and then start playing tournaments also. I didn't have the energy. And what happened was eventually my level dropped in everything else. And then finally it dropped in the World Championship also. And I lost my next match. So when I lost this match in Chennai, by the way, I had this, it was probably the biggest failure in my career. It happened in front of the home crowd. There were a lot of expectations. I'd worked very, very hard that year, but because because I left a lot of the mistakes till too late, it was not possible to fix them anymore. And other people had advanced in other areas beyond what I could catch up in that space. And so the obvious question was, if I now, because I got a seeded entry into the next cycle, the obvious question was, should I now try and qualify there? And by now, again, my self-confidence had created. So I had the feeling that then more or less my career was over at this point. But I thought it's a pity to give up the tournament. It's a nice tournament after all. So I told myself, well, I'll play for fun and see how it goes. But anyway, I was so disgusted with myself that after losing the match for 1.5 months, for the first time in my life, I didn't see a chessboard. I only spent time with my family, and every day I was just around my son and my wife and meeting some school friends, things like that. I I'd even stopped downloading the latest software or even following it almost. And then I decided to have a short 4-day session because that was all there was time for. 4-day session, like almost like a crash course, which with some one of my trainers for the match. And then on March 10th, I arrived in Russia to play the candidates. And once again, what happened in Prague, more or less the same pattern happened, which is that from nothing, with no expectations, nothing, I suddenly won the tournament because I started playing very well. And so once again, it was a kind of emotional release after failure. Failure is very good for this. You don't feel any pressure. You don't feel like you have to explain anything to anybody anymore. And more important, you stop obsessing about what you have identified, and you learn to take a more detached view. And that is a more balanced view always. And so again, I won. And subsequently, thanks to this victory, I managed to get back to the top. And that's roughly where I am. I mean, it's not like there have not been more failures since, but I think we have seen the principle. The most important thing I would highlight in these last two examples is simply the importance of taking risks. And between 2007 and 2010, if I had forced myself to experiment more and gamble, but it's very difficult. When you're world champion, you feel that every bad result, people will ask questions, so you're forced to be a bit more conservative. But in fact, not taking risks turns out to be the biggest risk. Everybody in the modern world, anything you do well, people will catch up soon. So unless you're learning new stuff, you're the one who's getting stuck. And the second thing is to understand what makes you do well. A lot of the examples I have given, maybe the first failure is technical, but often the technical failure produces psychological failure. You start to not believe in yourself. Or the psychological failure comes when it produces a bad result. You remember some game you lost in a similar position, so you automatically think, oh, I'll probably lose it again. You stop trying so hard. Or you get a winning position and then you think, oh, it's over. This one I do easily, and you relax. Everything, there's a kind of emotional stability. And probably the most important thing that I found is that if you fix the emotional problem, then things work out. One of the nicest things that I want to do is, that I try to do is to get a good night's sleep. Sometimes that makes the difference between a good game and a bad one. For the simple reason that if you spend the whole night thinking of the previous game, and there's a very natural tendency because every game is emotionally intensive, and if you think about it, you'll find it hard to sleep. But if you can find a way to push that aside, go to sleep and forget about that game for now and focus on the next one, that's important. And this probably is the easiest simple thing that we can do. I remember that if you've lost round one, telling yourself how to improve in round one while there is a round two going on is you're cheating yourself in round two. The time for everything comes later. And very often you can see that my recovery is simply having my family nearby or recovering emotionally before you recover on the chessboard. Every time I've seen that. So it's important to have good relationships, hobbies that distract you, other things you enjoy doing, good friends, things that have nothing to do with your career or your chosen career, but at the same time that you enjoy and that are meaningful. And it's important to find the time for that. So finally, I think we can say that this pandemic viewed from a certain viewpoint is a kind of big failure. It is not something that we are personally responsible for, of course, but at the same time, it has shut down a lot of things. Probably a lot of you are wondering, have your plans upset, just like me. I had 6 or 7 trips planned this year, and then everything went on hold. And you cannot think, but if you think of the pandemic, it's a great chance to ask yourself some hard questions. I mean, are where you are, is that where you want to be in a year or two? Has this enforced staying at home? I mean, by now you must be used to it. And now you must be thinking, my God, in March, I thought that if I wasn't doing this by April, if I wasn't doing this by June, I'm a failure. And now we're in August, we have not been able to do any of those things. Same thing with me. Suddenly think, well, were those things so important? And just like a failure allows you to question everything, the pandemic allows you to question everything. And without the guilt, without the feeling that we failed. It's an act of God, but it allows you to just see if there are things you want to rearrange and something new you want to do, what was most meaningful in your life, and act on that. And having done that, you may want to go back to what you were going to do anyway. But I mean simply that it's a good chance for all of us. And it's not like we've been given a choice in this matter, but it gives us a chance to rewire our priorities and everything before normal life resumes, if that happens soon. Anyway, those are the thoughts I wanted to share with you on the role that failure has played in my life and what I have learned from it. I'll be happy to take some questions now.
Yeah, so thank you very much. It's a pleasure to listen from you. I think this batch is so fortunate to hear from your words from the legend. Now, your words about the failure is a good chance is to go over everything again. I know you cited about the importance of having clear ambition, consistency, and the ability to take calculated risk. That those are very meaningful, sir, really. You talked about the failure which gives detachment from obsessions and allow you to question everything. I think this is something which we need to learn. We have a lot of questions from the students. The first question is from Sweta Vasudevan. Hi, Vishy sir. How does chess have an impact in your life? Because when I read this question, I remember, Mrs. Anjali Tendulkar saying that I can imagine cricket without Sachin, but I can never imagine, Sachin without cricket. Something like that. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, it's my career. It's what I've done all my life. Of course, I came to it as a hobby. I mean, when I learned it from my parents, I had no idea this was going to be so serious. I learned it like I learned many other sports and activities. Over time, it's filled my life, and I think I will always see life through the eyes of a chess player. Yeah, it's simply the dominant thing in my life. But as I said, as I've mentioned earlier, I acknowledge that I've had to sometimes go away from it to come back to it. So I would say that I can very easily, you should be able to imagine me without chess as well. And I should be able to imagine me without chess as well. But clearly it's made me everything that I am.
Yeah. So there's a question from Muthu Ganesh. So you won the Grandmaster World Championships, several other titles and several of the awards. Have you ever felt that you have done something great than these achievements?
I'm definitely very proud of them. I mean, when I became a Grandmaster, I understood I was the first Indian Grandmaster. I was the first Asian World Junior Champion. I was the first Asian World Champion. But I wouldn't dismiss it. And these are very, very happy moments that you remember all your life. And by the way, another thing failure teaches you is to appreciate the good things. I think before, if I was successful, I had this habit. Yeah, of course, I'm strong. That's why I'm successful. But then later in life, you understand, well, when you're successful, you should really be nice to yourself and enjoy that moment, because these things can come and go very fast. Anyway, so I think, but I don't sit and dwell on it a lot. I think that'll come at a later stage in my life when I'll sit and dwell on it. But yes, of course, these are things I worked very hard for, and I won after many years. So it means a lot to me.
Yeah. So this is a question from Jaya Balaji. Sir, what keeps you going when you constantly face failures in spite of giving your 100%?
I think it's the feeling that you're not able to find some ingredient. But very often when you're constantly failing, it means that you're getting better without realizing it also. So just like when you're constantly winning, you might be making mistakes, might be accumulating. It can be happen in the other direction also. I've typically found that even failure passes, and if you wait long enough, failure will pass again. But you can amplify it with the right work and the right attitude. So listen, all of us can question ourselves, analyze ourselves objectively, keep improving without failure. But we get relaxed, and that's the problem. So failure is a good excuse to do it, what should have been done even anyway.
Yeah. This is a question from Gunashir Karthik. He wants to know about your social life. Do you hang out with your friends, school friends? You know, do you spend time for socializing with, you know, friends?
Yes, friends, and it's a very nice. It's one of the nicest ways to recover, I would say. Of course, most of my life, my social life has been chess players. Especially if you travel to a chess tournament, the only people you know that place will be chess players. But 2007, we had our 20th reunion, and I actually met up a lot of schoolmates who I had not met in 20 years. The nice thing was how many of them made a big effort to come in for this reunion, because I think we were all keen to meet each other. And of course, after that, we've been staying in touch, and it's helped by Facebook and all these things, because I think once again we would have drifted apart. But it's very nice. I'm very close to a lot of my school friends, and it's nice because between my batch alone, they've gone to so many different areas that you get a good chance to compare lots of things over.
Okay, great, sir. Madhumita wants some tips from you, how to stay focused and to avoid distraction. So she has a goal. So how to keep our mind focused on our goal and to move away with the distractions? What are things you practice for that?
I think the brain is the only thing that is very difficult for us to control, because it is controlling us at the same time, and this gets a bit circular. You cannot force concentration. You cannot force these things. I mean, you can do it very briefly by telling myself, okay, I'm distracted, but I'm going to put these thoughts aside for 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes. You cannot do it for a day or a whole tournament. That much I know. What you can do is to give yourself interesting new problems. I mean, when I take risks and I do new things in chess, or I learn new things in life, I learn a new language or I learn a new skill and thing, then I want to do it. And I don't need to motivate myself or concentrate. It comes naturally. And when I don't do that, then it gets bored. So you can't impose your will on it, but if you try to learn new things, you take stock and you experiment, you take risks, then very often it's not a problem to concentrate. Most of you can verify this. There will be 1 or 2 subjects that you had no difficulty concentrating in because you enjoyed the subjects. And there must have been subjects that you force yourself the whole day and still nothing gets in. And it's the same principle, I think.
Yeah. The context from the Kirtivasa question is this. So you have a lot of awards, a lot of achievements, etc. What keeps you going? Where do you draw the achievement motivation? Say, for instance, Roger Federer has 20 Grand Slam titles, but still he wants more. You have all the achievements in place. Still, no. What drives you further? Why do you don't have a sense of complacency? How do you come out of it? The complacency, yeah.
Well, I think it's a question of what you want to do. I mean, I want to play chess and I like chess, and therefore it is not that I wanted to win these titles and that's it and I wanted to stop. I wanted to play chess and, by the way, win these titles. So it's easy. And I think the same with Federer. He likes tennis. So even after I lost my title and so on, it's not like I wanted to quit right away. I still like traveling. I like chess things. I like meeting my chess friends. I like the atmosphere. And so, but if you want to play, you still have to be responsible, do your work, and stay in shape. But I think you should stop when you don't want to do it anymore. it's not a question of, I wanted to do this title or finish this exam and that's it. I'm gone. It's not like that.
Fair point, sir. So Yogesh Ram is a close follower of you. So he asked a question. In World's Bliss semi-final, you waited for 1 minute and 43 seconds to play a move. If I am not wrong, it was the fourth move of the match. What was actually going on your mind before making that move?
It's very hard for me to even explain this. At that point, I was already number 4 in the world or something. And suddenly, on the fourth move, I couldn't remember what I wanted. Of course, not right away, but in some complicated line, I couldn't remember what I wanted to do. And the problem in top level chess is that if you don't know what you want to do on move 15, you don't know what you want to do on move 4 because one thing will lead there. And so suddenly my mind drew a blank, and it hasn't happened often at that level. So I have never been that blank since. I just couldn't think of anything. So I just kept staring at the board, trying to remember. And half of you wants to make a move anyway, because your clock is running down. But somehow that time I made the right decision to hold back till I came to my senses. And eventually then I remembered what I was looking for and I could start playing again. But it was a very strange experience. I'm happy it's not happened since.
Yes. Vignesh Tanumalayan wants to know, how challenging and interesting did you find Mr. Magnus Carlsen? As in the recent years, he has given a lot of very tough matches against you. So what kind of mindset you have with him when you face such a tough opponent?
Well, I think that's it. I have the mindset of playing a very tough opponent. I mean, he's someone who does a lot of the things that I try to do. So he experiments a lot. He takes a lot of risks. He's learning. I mean, many of the things I said, he's very impressive in how he keeps improving. And he's just a very tough opponent. So whenever you're going to play him, it's not enough to make a few good moves. You actually have to play a whole good game.
Right. So thank you, sir. The Lakshmi Narasimhan wants to know, do you have any unfulfilled ambitions, sir?
I would say most of the big ones I have. I mean, I really wanted the world title, but after 2006-07, that period, I pretty much fulfilled that. I always have ambitions. There are always things that I want to do, but nothing that is a deal breaker, so to speak.
Great. Renuga Subaraj wants to know, what's your favorite outdoor game? Do you play that? Do you play any outdoor games? And what's your next indoor game, which other indoor games you play as well?
I mean, I dabble a lot in everything, but over the years, as I got into a tournament circuit, I tended to do things more by myself because, if you want to play tennis or table tennis, you always have to find a partner, you have to find a racket, you have to find a court, and you cannot do something whenever you want. So over the years, I have found that slowly I have migrated into things like running or cycling, things I can do alone without depending on anyone. And especially walking and running, because that I can do in any city whenever I want. There is nothing I need. And more I tend to do those kinds of activities, but still if I get together with a friend, we'll play something.
Great, sir. Kirtana wants to know, how did you overcome and react to all negative criticisms, the trolls, etc., all those?
Mostly by ignoring it. I feel that some negative criticism is, especially if a close friend tells you or, someone in your circle makes an observation, you should listen to that because they know you well and they probably have something interesting to point out. But criticism from strangers and all, I think it's my job not to read it, simply. I mean, I've accepted that as a public figure, you cannot expect people not to say it. So I don't blame them for saying it, but it's not my job to read it. If you read it, then, I mean, occasionally someone will be very brilliant and identify something that you cannot see for yourself. But most of the time, you know it already. And I find that it's more emotionally stable for me not to read it.
Great. Right, sir. Fair point. Yes, Janathan asked this question. Sir, of all the matches you have played, what do you consider as your best match and why?
My matches, I would say my World Championship match with Kramnik was my best ever. If he means matches in the sense of games, then there are, of course, more candidates, but I can include my win against Aronian in Tata Steel in 2013, in Mexico 2007. There are some games that I published in my best games collection. Funnily enough, more games from the past than now. I don't know why. It's not like I haven't played beautiful games now, but I remember the past more fondly.
Okay. So Muthu Ganesh wants to know, right? So, you are a rapid chess player, right? So you'll be taking the decisions in a split of a second or whatever. Right. So what is your advice on rapid decision-making process? Since as a manager, we have to make decisions. You take decisions quickly, all right? So
yeah, but you exaggerate. I mean, even decision-making is something you train. And in chess in general, and especially in rapid chess, it's not decision-making, it's just a muscle memory. It's the same thing. In the same way that you open a door without thinking or hit a ball without thinking, you play chess without thinking. I mean, very often I don't have the time to sit and think, now my opponent has done this, this is what he threatens, this is what I should do. You don't have the time to work later. It goes by intuition. So, and to get better at that, you need to keep working and practicing often. So the work you do at home is what allows you to play fast there.
Great, sir. Ram Karthikeyan wants to know, there are 16 Grandmasters from Tamil Nadu during 2010 to 2020. All right. So whom do you think as your potential successor for you or something like that? Who would be the next Vishwanathan Anand or whomsoever it is? Or who do you see the bright talents in this field? You want some 2-3 names? Yeah.
Well, right now, if the question is Tamil Nadu alone, then there's Pragnananda, there's Murali Karthikeyan, there's Arvind Chidambaram, and there is Gukesh. So Pragnananda and Gukesh are still very, very young. The other two are a bit older, but they're also very, very strong players. They are easily the 4 best in Tamil Nadu.
Okay. The final question from Pranav Murthy, sir. In the simultaneous exhibition match, which which happened in Zurich 2009, you played against more than 20 players at a time. Do you go with any fixed strategy for such games, or you will adjust yourself for that situation? So
no, I don't have a fixed strategy because I don't know who my opponents are. Very often I will not know anything about them till I get there. And it is understood that they are not grandmasters, obviously, that they are casual players who, and the simultaneous display is a way for a top professional to play casual games. So I will have to make it up there. The only thing is, very quickly I try to get a sense of how dangerous they are to me, and then I can modify my play accordingly.
Sri Vishwanathan sir, it's a pleasure listening to you. All right, so Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan. We wish you many more, accolades to come. We wish you all the best, in your career as well. Dr. Gautam, over to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. So it's a great session for all of us. So I have a personal question. After that, we can leave this meeting. Sir, why you are being ambassador for this cerebral palsy? So,
okay, I found that chess is one game that visually handicapped and also people with cerebral palsy can play at a high level. I mean, if they play a physical sport, it's understood that they're having a highly diminished experience. But I found that many of them are quite passionate and able to play chess at a high level, despite their limitations. And, I felt happy that chess meant a lot to them. So I tried to encourage it a bit and support them a bit. I thought there was an obvious connection with chess for them.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. It's a great, it's a proud moment for all of us and TSMites to have you with us, and I think a lot of questions are there, and students are very happy to have you. So we'll down the time when the situation will be normal, given your available free time, we would like to invite you to our campus, our beautiful campus. We'll definitely raise a request through our Bali madam. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you for giving us time, and from the behalf of TSM, we are very much grateful to you. And with this, we are ending this meeting, sir. Thank you very much.
Can all of you, just for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, can you unmute and can you join me in the chorus of congratulations to him? Just clap the hands, please. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.